Hello everyone, nearly 5 a.m. now in Nepal, where a massive tremor has quake-weary residents on edge again.
And it's 8 a.m. in North Korea, where a former aide to the country's brutal dictator claims Kim Jong-un is losing popularity with the elite and possibly his grip on power.
And 7 a.m. in the Philippines, where Manny Pacquiao has returned home to a hero's welcome. Greetings everyone, I'm Michael Holmes.
Hello, I'm Lynda Kinkade. Thanks for joining us. This is CNN Today.
Welcome everyone. Nepal, a place that has been dealt more than its share of misery in recent weeks, is reeling from yet another deadly earthquake. Of course, it is the second big one in just 17 days.
The 7.3 magnitude tremor, technically an aftershock, has now killed at least 50 people in Nepal, more than a dozen in India, and at least one person in Tibet. Those numbers, though, are certain to rise.
The panic, the despair, an eerie echo from last month's tragedy that's already claimed more than 8,000 lives. Meanwhile, the rumbling aftershocks becoming more familiar but no less frightening and terrifying to the thousands of people spending the nights in the streets, where they feel the safest after watching things like that, this building crumbling to the ground.
And of course, gazing upon block after block of caved-in homes. But those clogging the roads are unintentionally slowing down aid efforts, making it much harder for crews to reach those in need.
Now, the landslides aren't helping either. Have a look at that. All that loose rock and debris sliding down the hill, destroying everything in its path. We've got a view from the sky also to show you, just incredible, that dust there rising as the debris falls down the mountainsides. Incredible aftershocks as well. We did ask CNN's Will Ripley about them a little earlier in the program.
They've experienced just today 4 aftershocks since the big 7.3 quake that toppled this 5-story building behind me, and the one that we felt about 30 minutes ago. The building started to jolt. We could hear the dogs in the neighborhood howling, and then you could hear people yelling and running into the streets. We just walked a couple blocks down and spoke with a family who are sleeping in a shed right now because their home is one of the many buildings here in Kathmandu that was really weakened in the first quake. There are cracks in the walls, and just like this one, which was also weakened, they're very fearful that if another aftershock strikes, it could come tumbling down as well. And they say they have no choice but to stick together. They have what they need. They're together, and they haven't lost any family members. They say their situation far better than so many here who have lost people close to them, Michael.
And Will, relief workers and aid workers were already on the ground there dealing with the aftermath of the first quake. Has that made the response to this quake any faster?
Certainly the infrastructure is better now, Lynda. We saw the relief workers at the airport. Our flight was able to get in after just circling over Kathmandu for about 30 minutes. Of course, compared to the days that it took to get supplies in during the initial quake on April 25th, that's an improvement. But what this major aftershock has done is it really has set things back. A lot of the roads are closed, so crews haven't even been able to get to some of the more remote areas where they expect that the death toll in all of this will sharply rise.
Of course, the need for aid is still so great in Nepal. If you'd like to help, you can head to our website. CNN has put together a vetted list of aid organisations that are helping in the quake zone. You can find that at cnn.com/impact.
Now, as we mentioned, Tuesday's 7.3 magnitude quake, technically considered an aftershock of April's massive magnitude 7.8. Now, Tom Sater is joining us now with other parts of the story. And when we spoke last hour, you mentioned that 4.2, I think it was. Will Ripley in Kathmandu didn't feel that, so it must have been very specific.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of them. Some of them are only 3.0, and you may feel barely feel something, but then a 5.2 Kathmandu is going to kick things up. We have seen in the last 15 hours 15 aftershocks that are at least 4.0 or higher. Now that includes the 7.3. This is considered an aftershock, and we'll talk about it. But in Kathmandu, even though there was some shaking, it was considered moderate in the last 15 hours. And of course, doing some more damage to those vulnerable buildings and the historical sites. But again, it was east and of them that was strong and very strong shaking. But we all have to go back to the very first one, 7.8, when we had a swarm of aftershocks that followed almost every hour and a half to 2 hours. And it went on for days. We had the very large 6.7 causing landslides. But then in the last week, we've had maybe one a day for almost a week until the last 15 hours. And we had the 7.3, and it was shallow, which means a lot of shaking. And it's all along that same rupture in, of course, our fault line. Let's talk about that. But first, the USGS says there's a 35% chance, based on population and the strength of the shaking, that maybe we would have unfortunately, to 1,000 deaths with this aftershock. It does not take in consideration those that are sleeping outdoors. So let's hopeful that we're all hopeful that the number will be much lower. So here we go. The initial epicenter. Very little damage from that 7.8 to the north, where we found over 250 hikers. Fine. Off toward the west, to the south. But right along that epicenter, once that energy was able to crack through, we had a rupture, and it made its way to the east. And that's why in Kathmandu and points to the north, 50 and 60 kilometers into Langtang, the popular trekking tracks, that's where we had a lot of the damage. That rupture continues to develop and move eastward. All of the aftershocks that we have seen with the first one have been right here. And look where our second aftershock, the large one, that was in the last 15 hours. So it's safe to assume this occurred because of the stress on the land due to the first one. Now, when we talk about the strong and very strong shaking, there are a number of villages, and this is rough terrain. They didn't even have that amount of damage with the first initial quake in this region. This is brand new. Doesn't mean there weren't landslides and some village problems and, of course, some damage, but they're going to have to assess this now. That's why they're saying this could add another $1 billion, but it's all about safety. We're watching the area again, and for the most part, we're going to have more. I mean, Lynda and Michael, it looks like it was a 1 in 200 chance to have one that was a 7.3. But there's going to be a few more. It looks like there's still some energy locked up under the surface of the earth.
Really scary for the people there.
Absolutely.
Tom Sater, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that.